Can you explain why your company's new security software has the same vulnerability that caused the databack scandal 3 months ago?
The conference room erupted into chaos before Chibuzo Ademi could finish his sentence. A journalist in the third row stood up, phone already recording, voice cutting through the carefully orchestrated product launched like a blade. Ms. Min-Seo Ademi, can you explain why your company's new security software has the same vulnerability that caused the data break scandal 3 months ago? Min-Seo froze. Chibuzo watched his wife's face drain of color under the stage lights, her fingers tightening around the presentation clicker. 200 people, 15 cameras, live stream running. He'd warned her about this exact scenario yesterday morning while she scrolled through her phone, half listening. Min-Seo's voice cracked slightly. We've implemented multiple layers of protection that. But the core architecture is identical, another voice called out. Your own white paper confirms it. Chibuzo saw her chest rise too quickly, panic breathing. She was spiraling in real time, and the phones were multiplying like predators sensing blood. He'd spent 6 years as her director of risk assessment, a title that sounded important but meant he wrote reports she skimmed and attended meetings where she introduced him as my husband before talking over anything he contributed. He stood up from his seat in the second row. If I may, his voice carried without shouting, the careful diction his mother had drilled into him mixing with the sole accent he'd picked up living here for 8 years. The room shifted. Min-Seo's eyes found his, wide and desperate. The comparison to data break is understandable but inaccurate. May I approach? Min-Seo nodded, stepping back from the podium like it had burned her. Chibuzo moved up the stairs, his sleeve riding up slightly to reveal the edge of the Ensabiti symbols tattooed up his forearm, ancient Igbo writing he'd gotten inked in Lagos 2 months ago. Min-Seo had called it an identity crisis. He called it remembering who he was before he became her accessory. The data break vulnerability exploited a single-point authentication system, Chibuzo said, pulling up a slide Min-Seo had skipped in her rush. Our architecture uses distributed verification with rotating encryption keys. The similarity you're noting is in the interface language, not the security model. Think of it like 2 houses with the same color door but completely different lock systems. He walked them through it, 3 minutes. No jargon they couldn't follow, no condescension. When the same journalist tried to interrupt, Chibuzo acknowledged the question, promised to address it, and did exactly that 15 seconds later. Min-Seo stood to the side, watching him control the room she'd lost. Does that clarify the distinction? Chibuzo asked finally. The journalist sat down. A few people even nodded. Chibuzo turned back to Min-Seo, holding out the clicker. Ms. Ademi, would you like to continue with the product timeline? Her hand trembled slightly when she took it. Thank you, Chibuzo. He returned to his seat. The presentation limped forward, and somewhere in that room, someone's video was already uploading. By the time they reached the car, Min-Seo's phone was ringing. Chibuzo drove while she answered her publicist, her COO, her mother in Busan. Her voice climbed with each call, switching between Korean and English with the fluidity that had impressed him when they first met at an international tech conference in Singapore. He'd heard this pitch before, usually after he'd caught an error in a contract or flagged a hire who later embezzled $50,000. The pattern was always the same. Crisis, his intervention, her brief gratitude, then slow erasure of his contribution as she rebuilt the narrative around her own recovery. They're calling it a save, Min-Seo said, finally off the phone. Rachel says the video is everywhere. You're trending. The security explanation is solid, Chibuzo said, changing lanes. That's what matters. Chibuzo, she turned in her seat. You humiliated me up there. His hands tightened on the wheel. I prevented a disaster. By making me look incompetent. You froze, Min-Seo. I didn't do that to you. Silence filled the car like flood water. Chibuzo felt the familiar weight of it, the way she could weaponize quiet until he apologized for existing in her space. He'd grown up in a family where keeping peace meant swallowing your voice. His father had done it with his grandfather, the weight of Igbo tradition and respect for elders crushing individual needs. He'd learned the same dance. Min-Seo had been different once, back when they met, and she'd valued his careful analysis, his ability to see 3 moves ahead. But 6 years of marriage and her meteoric rise had rewritten their dynamic. She was the vision. He was the caution she'd learned to resent. "I asked you not to speak unless I called on you," Min-Seo said quietly. "You asked me to be invisible. I asked you to trust me." Chibuzo pulled into their driveway, a house in Gangnam that Min-Seo had chosen and decorated while he worked 60-hour weeks keeping her company's operations running. "I do trust you. I don't trust your ego." She got out without responding. Chibuzo sat in the car for 5 minutes, watching the light in her office turn on upstairs. His phone buzzed. A text from his younger sister, Adiz in Lagos. "Brother, you're famous. Mama is showing everyone at church. She says she always knew you were brilliant. The aunties are calling you our Korean son-in-law who showed Seoul how Igbo men think." He opened Twitter. The video had 4 million views. The top comment: "This man just saved his wife's entire company in 3 minutes and she looked like she wanted to murder him for it. King behavior." Another: "Find someone who looks at you the way Chibuzo Ademi doesn't look at his wife." And another: "CEO panic versus director calm. This is what actual leadership looks like. Also, did anyone else see those tattoos? Man is carrying culture and competence." Chibuzo closed the app. He didn't want this. Fame felt like exposure, like standing in a spotlight that showed every crack in his life he'd been carefully managing in shadow. Inside, Min-Seo wasn't in her office. He found her in the kitchen, soju glass already half empty, laptop open to a news site. The headline read, "Mystery Man Saves Tech Launch. Who is Chibuzo Ademi?" "They're writing profiles about you," she said without looking up. "LinkedIn is crashing from search traffic to your profile. Someone found out you have 2 master's degrees and speak 5 languages. They're calling you the Renaissance Man of Seoul." Chibuzo set his keys down. "Min-Seo, do you know how hard I've worked?" Her voice was controlled, each word measured in the way she defaulted to when emotions threatened to crack her perfect exterior. "I built this company from nothing. I took the risks. I made the decisions, and now everyone thinks you're the reason it works." "That's not what happened." "That's exactly what happened." She finally looked at him. "You made me small, Chibuzo, in front of everyone who matters." He saw it then, the same expression she'd worn when her father had questioned her business plan at a family gathering, when a board member had suggested she wasn't ready for CEO, when Korean business culture had implied that a woman, especially one married to a foreign man, needed to prove herself twice over. Min-Seo's armor was her competence. He'd cracked it in public, and she couldn't forgive that, even if staying silent would have destroyed what she'd built. "I made you safe," Chibuzo said. "There's a difference." "Get out." "Min-Seo, I need you to leave this room, right now." Chibuzo went upstairs. He lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt the marriage shift beneath him like tectonic plates finding a new position. His phone kept buzzing. Interview requests, LinkedIn messages, a consulting firm offering him a 6-figure contract to do crisis communication training, another company wanting him as their chief strategy officer. For 6 years, he'd been an accessory to Min-Seo's success. Now strangers were offering him an identity separate from her shadow. He didn't sleep. By morning, the video had 15 million views. Chibuzo came downstairs to find Min-Seo already gone, a note on the counter in her precise Hangul. "Emergency board meeting. Don't wait up." His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Chibuzo Ademi?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Yejin Park from Stratica Consulting. We specialize in corporate crisis management. I watched you handle that security question yesterday. We'd like to fly you to New York to discuss a partnership role." "I'm not looking for work." "Everyone's looking for work. They just don't know it yet. We're talking equity, full autonomy, and a client list that would make your current position look like an internship. Think about it." She hung up before he could say no again. 3 more calls came that morning. Then 2 emails from venture capital firms. Then a message from a literary agent asking if he'd considered writing a book about strategic thinking under pressure. Chibuzo sat at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold, and realized his life was fracturing into something unrecognizable. Min-Seo came home at 9 that night. Chibuzo had made dinner, jollof rice the way his mother taught him mixed with banchan Min-Seo loved, a fusion that had once symbolized their marriage. She looked exhausted, her suit wrinkled, makeup faded. "The board wants you to do a press conference," she said, dropping her bag. "Clarify your role, support the company message." "What message is that?" "That we're a team. That yesterday was collaboration, not a rescue." Chibuzo set down his fork. "Is that what it was?" "It's what it needs to be." Min-Seo sat across from him. "Chibuzo, I need you to do this, for me, for us. You sent me away last night for humiliating you. Now you want me to perform unity." "I was upset. I overreacted." "You meant it." He met her eyes. "You've meant it for 3 years, Min-Seo. Every time I catch something you missed, every time someone mentions my name in a meeting, I watch you shrink me a little more. Yesterday just made it public." "That's not fair." "When was the last time you introduced me as your director of risk assessment instead of your husband? When did you last cite my work in a presentation? I write the reports. You present them. I find the problems. You take credit for solving them. And I stayed quiet because I loved you and thought it mattered more than being seen." Min-Seo's face hardened. "You're jealous." "I'm tired." Chibuzo stood. "I'm tired of being your safety net and your scapegoat. I'm tired of watching you dismiss my work in public and need it desperately in private. I'm tired of making myself smaller so you can feel bigger." "Then leave." Her voice was ice. "If it's so awful being married to me, leave." Chibuzo looked at her for a long moment, this woman he'd met when they were both hungry and ambitious and kind to each other's dreams. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe I should." He went upstairs and packed a bag. Min-Seo didn't follow him. Chibuzo stayed at his friend Kwame's apartment in Itaewon for 3 days while the internet debated his marriage. Someone found their wedding photos, the beautiful ceremony that had blended Ibo traditions with Korean customs, analyzed body language, created threads about cross-cultural power dynamics, and competent men with insecure partners. It was invasive and horrible and uncomfortably accurate. The job offers kept coming. Chibuzo accepted a consulting contract with Stratica, remote work, 6 months to start. They wanted him to develop crisis response frameworks. He could do that. He'd been doing it for free for years. On the 4th day, Min-Seo called. "I want to talk." They met at a coffee shop in Samcheongdong. Neither of them frequented neutral territory. Min-Seo looked different, softer somehow, her hair down instead of pulled back in her CEO armor. She'd lost weight. Chibuzo noticed with the same analytical distance he'd learned to apply to everything about their marriage. "I've been watching the interviews," she said after they ordered. "Everyone asks about you, your background, your methodology. One reporter spent 20 minutes asking me how I convinced a man with your credentials to stay behind the scenes when you're clearly executive material." "What did you say?" "I didn't have an answer." Min-Seo's hands wrapped around her cup. "I've been thinking about that, about why I couldn't explain it, and I realized it's because I never convinced you of anything. I just took. And you let me because you're the kind of person who thinks love means sacrifice." Chibuzo said nothing. "My father told me I'd never make it," Min-Seo continued. "That women like me had to be twice as good and never show weakness. Then I married a foreigner, a black man, and the whispers started. That I damaged my credibility. That our children wouldn't be properly Korean. That I was making everything harder, so I made myself sharp. I cut away anything soft, including gratitude, including partnership. I saw you as support structure, not architect. And when you held me up in public, all I could see was my father being right, that I needed someone else to save me." "I didn't save you," Chibuzo said. "I clarified information you already knew but were too panicked to articulate." "See, you even defend me when I'm admitting I'm wrong." Min-Seo smiled sadly. "That's the problem, Chibuzo. You've been defending me from myself for years, and I punished you for it." Why are you telling me this? Because I don't know how to fix it, but I need you to know I see it now. She pushed a folder across the table. That's a new org chart. I split my CFO role, created a chief strategic officer position, full executive authority, direct board access, equity stake. It's yours if you want it. Chibuzo opened the folder. The salary was substantial. The title was real. This doesn't fix us. I know, but maybe it's a start to fixing me. Min-Seo met his eyes. I'm in therapy 3 sessions so far. My therapist asked me to list my accomplishments without using I or me. I couldn't do it. Every success was singular, like I'd conquered the world alone. But I didn't, Chibuzo. You were there for every major decision, every crisis, every late night when I wanted to quit. And I erased you from the story because I was terrified of seeming dependent. Min-Seo, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to let me prove I can change. Not through grand gestures or public statements, through daily practice, through recognizing you in meetings, through sharing credit, through being a partner instead of a tyrant. Chibuzo closed the folder. I got a tattoo. She blinked at the non sequitur. I saw, on your arm. There's more. He unbuttoned his collar slightly, revealing the edge of Ensabiti symbols that wound up his neck. And here. He pulled up his sleeve further, showing the full design that covered his forearm and disappeared under his shirt. Traditional Ibo patterns mixed with Adinkra symbols and Korean trigrams. And across my chest and torso. I got them in Lagos, then Accra, then Seattle. Every city I traveled to for your company, I added a piece. Min-Seo stared. Why? Because I needed something permanent that was mine, something you couldn't take credit for or diminish. Every time I made myself smaller for you, I added to it. It's a map of my erasure. Chibuzo rebuttoned his collar. And I'm done adding to it. She looked shattered. Good, Chibuzo thought, and immediately hated himself for the satisfaction. I don't want the job, he said finally. Not yet, maybe not ever with your company, but I appreciate the offer. What do you want? Honestly, I don't know anymore. I spent 6 years wanting you to see me. Now everyone sees me, and it feels like a different kind of invisibility. At least before, I knew my shape. Now I'm just a viral moment people project onto. For what it's worth, Min-Seo said quietly, I always saw you. That's why I kept you close. I just convinced myself that needing you was the same as valuing you. They sat in silence. Chibuzo felt the weight of years between them, the accumulated small deaths of dismissed suggestions and overridden decisions and introductions that reduced him to a relationship status instead of a human with expertise. I need time, Chibuzo said finally. How much? I don't know. Min-Seo nodded. Can I call you? Not every day, just sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. She stood to leave, then paused. That journalist, the one who asked the question, she called me yesterday, asked if I felt threatened by your competence. What did you say? I hung up, but the answer is yes. I have felt threatened, and I'm sorry for making that your burden. She left. Chibuzo sat with his coffee, watching the street through the window, and felt something unfamiliar, possibility. Not happiness, not yet, but the space where happiness might grow if he gave it room. The weeks that followed were strange. Chibuzo took the Stratica contract, worked from Quame's apartment, and discovered he was good at teaching others what he'd been practicing for years. His client list grew. His bank account stabilized. His phone still buzzed with attention he didn't want, but he learned to filter it, to find the signal in the noise. Min-Seo called once a week, never asking him to return, just updating him on small victories. She'd credited him in a board presentation. She'd hired a chief operating officer to handle details she'd been micromanaging. She'd started delegating instead of controlling. Each call was brief, respectful of his boundaries. Chibuzo didn't know if he believed it. Belief required sustained evidence, not anecdotes. 3 months after the conference, Min-Seo's company announced a major acquisition. The press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday. Min-Seo called Monday night. I'm terrified, she admitted in Korean, the language she defaulted to when vulnerable. You've done acquisitions before. Not without you reviewing the terms. Not without you finding the tripwires. She paused. I'm not asking you to fix this. I have a team now. They're competent. I trust them. I just wanted you to know that I know what I'm missing, that I take responsibility for not building this capacity earlier, and that I'm doing it anyway because that's the only way I prove I've changed. How do you feel about that? Chibuzo asked. Terrified, but also proud. Is that weird? No, Chibuzo said softly in Ibo, knowing she'd learned enough to understand. That's growth. The press conference went fine. Not perfect, but fine. Min-Seo stumbled once, corrected herself, and kept going. No one had to save her. Chibuzo watched the livestream from Quame's couch and felt something loosen in his chest. She called after, I did it. You did. It wasn't smooth. It was honest, that's better. Chibuzo, Min-Seo's voice wavered. I miss you, not as my fixer, as my person, as the man who sees the world in patterns and explains them to me at midnight when I can't sleep. As my partner, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've used up my grace, but I miss you. Chibuzo closed his eyes. I miss you too. Does that mean? It means I miss you. It doesn't mean I've decided anything. Okay, she sounded small. That's fair. They talked for an hour. Not about business. About Min-Seo's therapy, about Chibuzo's sister Adi's planning to visit Seoul, about the Korean novel Min-Seo was reading, and the Chimamanda Adichie essay Chibuzo had found. It felt like the early days, before success and resentment had calcified their dynamic. When they hung up, Quame looked at him from across the room. You going back? I don't know. Do you love her? I don't know that either. I love who we were. I don't know if I love who we became. And I definitely don't know if I can trust who she's trying to be. That's a lot of not knowing. Yeah, Chibuzo smiled slightly. But it's honest not knowing, that's new. The 4th month brought a complication. A profile in Fortune magazine titled The Man Behind the Moment, Chibuzo Ademi's Quiet Revolution. They'd interviewed his colleagues, his sister, even Min-Seo. She'd been generous, almost painfully so, detailing his contributions to her company's success. The journalist noted the separation, speculated briefly about reconciliation, then focused on Chibuzo's rising consulting career. The article ended with a question. When asked what he wants people to know about that viral moment, Ademi is quiet for a long time. Then, switching between English and Ibo as he often does when thoughtful. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about preventing harm. That's what I do. I see the fracture before the break. I just want to be seen for doing it. Chibuzo read it 3 times. He hadn't said that exactly, but it was close enough to truth that he didn't hate it. Min-Seo texted, the article is beautiful. You deserve every word. Chibuzo didn't reply immediately. He was learning to sit with things, to not fill every silence with appeasement. 5 months after the separation, Min-Seo asked to meet again. Same coffee shop. She looked different again, this time healthier. Color in her face, ease in her shoulders. I have something to show you, she said, pulling out her phone. I've been keeping a document. Every time I make a decision without consulting my team, I write it down. Every time I take credit for collaborative work, I write it down. Every time I catch myself dismissing someone's expertise, I write it down. It's 43 pages long. She handed him the phone. Chibuzo scrolled through entries dated and detailed. April 3rd, interrupted Jihoon in marketing meeting to correct him, but his point was valid. Apologized after. April 9th, told board the acquisition terms were my idea. They were Chibuzo's framework from 2 years ago. Sent correction email. April 15th, caught myself about to overrule my new CSO on security protocols. Stopped. Asked questions instead. His approach was better. This is the work, Min-Seo said. Not grand gestures, not public apologies, daily accounting, daily practice. My therapist says accountability is a muscle. I'm building it. Chibuzo looked at her. Why are you showing me this? Because you asked for proof. This is proof. I'm not perfect. I still mess up. But I'm catching it faster. And I'm changing the pattern instead of justifying it. Min-Seo, Don't decide now, she interrupted. I'm not asking you to decide. I'm showing you evidence that I'm serious. Whether you come back or not, I need to be different, for myself. But I want you to know the option is there. Not the old option where you're my unpaid crisis consultant. A real partnership. Equal billing. Shared authority. Your name on the door if you want it. I have a career now, Chibuzo said. Independent of you. I know, that makes me happy. You should have always had that. She smiled. I'm selfish enough to want you back anyway, but I'm healthy enough now to survive if you say no. Chibuzo set the phone down. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay. If I hadn't gone viral, if that moment had stayed private, would you have changed? Min-Seo didn't answer immediately. That was new too, the willingness to sit with hard questions. I don't know, she said finally. I want to say yes. I want to believe I would have hit bottom eventually and climbed out. But honestly, you're probably right that I wouldn't have. I would have kept taking and you would have kept giving until one of us disappeared entirely. That's what I thought. Does that mean you can't forgive me? It means I'm clear-eyed about what forced the change. You didn't choose growth. You were shamed into it. Yes, Min-Seo said simply, but I'm choosing to continue it. The shame opened the door. I'm the one walking through it every day. Doesn't that count for something? Chibuzo thought about the tattoos hidden under his clothes, the map of his slow erasure written in the languages of his ancestors. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, shrinking himself to fit Min-Seo's ego. He thought about the man he was now, still finding his shape, but at least searching in the light. I don't want to come back to your company, he said finally. Min-Seo's face fell. Okay. But I don't want to divorce you either. She looked up, hope breaking through carefully managed control. I want to try something new, Chibuzo continued. We date, like adults who don't live together and aren't financially entangled. We build something separate from your company and my career. We see if we actually like each other without the power dynamic that poisoned us. No promises, no timelines, just practice. I'd like that, Min-Seo whispered. And you keep seeing your therapist. And I find one too, because I have my own things to work on about why I accepted being diminished. Deal. And if it doesn't work, we end it clean. No bitterness, no public drama. We acknowledge we tried and move forward as better people who couldn't stay married. Agreed. Min-Seo reached across the table, then stopped, asking permission with her eyes. Chibuzo nodded. She took his hand. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on us. Thank you for doing the work. They sat like that for a while, two people who'd loved each other badly learning to try again with open eyes. 6 months after the conference, Chibuzo and Min-Seo went to dinner. A real date, not a business meeting disguised as intimacy. She asked him about his clients. He asked about her company. They split the check. When he dropped her off at her place, she kissed him at the door, tentative and sweet. Saranghi, she said softly, I know I don't get to say that yet, but I want you to know it's true. Chibuzo touched the edge of his collar, feeling the tattoo beneath. I love you too, both the you were and the you're becoming. Is that enough? I don't know yet, but it's a start. A year after the viral moment, Chibuzo and Min-Seo were still dating. He'd moved into his own apartment in Yongsan. She'd promoted 3 people into leadership roles and learned to let them lead. They had dinner twice a week, texted daily, and were building something neither of them had experienced before, mutual respect. The internet had moved on to new viral moments, new people to project onto. Chibuzo's consulting practice was thriving. Min-Seo's company had stabilized and grown without relying on a single person to prevent disaster. They were at Chibuzo's apartment, cooking together for the first time in months, jollof rice and kimchi jjigae side by side on the stove, when Min-Seo said, I want to ask you something. Okay. Move back in with me, not to the old house, somewhere new, somewhere we choose together, as equals. Chibuzo kept stirring the rice. That's a big step. I know, and if you say no, I understand, but I think we're ready. I think I'm ready. He set down the spoon and turned to face her. Min-Seo stood in his kitchen, hopeful and vulnerable and present in a way she'd never been before. Ask me again in 3 months, Chibuzo said. She smiled. Okay. And Min-Seo. Yeah. Thank you for becoming someone I could say yes to. They finished cooking. They ate. They talked about maybe, about someday, about the slow work of building trust from rubble. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, 2 people choosing each other with clear eyes and hard-won wisdom. The video that started it all was still online, a moment frozen in time. But Chibuzo didn't watch it anymore. He was too busy living the aftermath, the messy, complicated, beautiful work of becoming visible to himself and to the woman he loved. And that was enough. If you enjoyed this story about second chances and the courage it takes to rebuild broken trust, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more compelling narratives about real human relationships. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Can trust be rebuilt after public humiliation? Would you have given Min-Seo a second chance? What did you think about the cross-cultural dynamics in their marriage? Let's discuss. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching, and remember, being truly seen starts with seeing yourself clearly.